Movie buff specialist Phil and John are back with our 60-second movie as we continue counting down our top 100 of all time. And we're not actually talking about John's number 62 because it happens to be my number 61. So instead of talking about It's a Wonderful Life this week and literally doing what every store around America has done and turning into Christmas right after Halloween, we're going to give it at least one more week for Thanksgiving to pretend it's a holiday, and then we'll just move forward with that. But I know, John, you're up in Canada, so Thanksgiving is a different holiday. That's a different time of year. So anyway, so we'll be doing It's a Wonderful Life next week. Instead, John replaced it with Kiss, Kiss, Bang, Bang, and I have a very long engagement, which is a good thing because next week's going to be a very long week for me because I have to sit down and watch Spotlight. So had to do it, John. Had to do it. Had to start off right like that. It's not going to be a wonderful life for me next week. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, well, it's fine. Don't worry. We're gonna talk about Spotlight next week, and then you can just rag on it. But
exactly, I just wanted
to talk about these two great movies. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang obviously didn't make my top 100, and the reason why I replaced It's a Wonderful Life with it is because it is just kind of one of those same like seasonal movies that I watch at the exact same time every year, and it doesn't get enough attention.
It doesn't. That's Shane Black's biggest problem for his entire career. Shane Black is one of those people who is incredibly well loved by specific people, specific movie fans, and is completely ignored by the vast majority of movie fans. And that's just unfortunately how his life has gone. He wrote the original Lethal Weapon. That was his big thing. Did Last Action Hero, Long Kiss Goodnight, which really didn't do much. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, The Nice Guys, Iron Man 3, which is the worst Iron Man. Like he's just, he has never gotten the traction that he needed, despite the fact that he writes really, really well. He's just kind of living, unfortunately, after the Lethal Weapon series, he was just kind of in the wrong era after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think this film itself is pretty indicative of that because it is kind of just paying homage to the noir films in a way neo-noirs don't usually approach it in the same way that Shane Black does here, but he's able to present it in a way that's incredibly entertaining and able to pull out some fantastic performances out of it through the film as well.
Yeah, I think this is the best Val Kilmer and Michelle Monaghan have ever been. Michelle Monaghan is phenomenal in Gone Baby Gone. Gone Baby Gone is such a great movie. She's great in that, but I think this is the best she's ever been. I think this is the best that Val Kilmer's ever been. I love that he's Gay Perry. I think that's funny that this movie was made only 16 years ago and he was just referred to as Gay Perry throughout the entire movie. Just kind of showing where like things have changed. But also the fact that it is very much a wink at Hollywood, where Hollywood, that's really the gay guy. That's a pretty Hollywood thing to do. And so I do think like I love the style of this movie. I love how hard he leans into it. I love like the little cuts and the flashbacks because at the end of the day, he's making fun of how seriously Hollywood takes themselves. That's really this movie is very much making fun of these method actors and how Hollywood will use people to try to get people to get less money. And you go to all these parties and we're going to bring in Gay Perry so you can learn how to act like a real detective. And we're going to have you do all these things. Like, I love how hard it leans into that. And by doing that, it breaks the fourth wall over and over again. Robert Downey Jr.'s narration is honestly obnoxious, but in a good, purposeful way. And it makes for an incredibly entertaining movie that just gets more and more chaotic as it goes on and almost becomes like meaningless as it goes. Like, it's just like, well, who cares what's happening? But then it ends with that heavy moment, and oh no, your sister did kill. Oh, okay. It's so winking at everybody. And that's really what Shane Black does. And maybe that's a reason why Shane Black hasn't really been able to build up much success out in Hollywood.
Yeah. Cause I mean, if we get down to it, this movie really tells you, it kind of treats the audience as if they don't understand how these films work for a large portion through Robert Downey Jr.'s narration in it, because it's really directing your attention to specific things.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, there's the daughter. Better pay attention to that. That's not going to come up at all later. And it's like those little things that Shane Black does, but he presents it in such a way where it's still amusing and it doesn't feel like he's belittling you as a someone who's taking in the film.
Yeah, and it could very easily feel like that. Like it could very easily feel like he's just like he's being he's too smart for his own good. I mean, we see that a lot in indie movies. That's something, they'll try to be like too witty with their narration and instead it just comes across as stupid. And I think that he has a great handle on it. And that's, there's always that thing, it's the whole adaptation scene with Robert McKee. Don't use voiceover. Voiceover is bullshit. But if you know how to use voiceover, if you're Charlie Kaufman, if you're Martin Scorsese, if you're Shane Black, right, that should be the only thing you write. And Terrence Malick, we just watched Tree of Life.
Mm-hmm.
Every line in that movie is voiceover. I don't know if there's anything spoken by people. And so like when you watch this happen, oh, that's fun. When you watch this happen, it looks like we got our first ad, John. Good job. But when you watch this happen and you watch this unfold, it really does work. Like everything that Shane Black does in this movie really does work. And I think it's just super entertaining. And yeah.
Yeah. And it starts in such an innocuous way with us going back to Harry's childhood to kind of set it up, because the way, and this opening sequence is so important. It tells you so much information about this film. Mm-hmm. Not only does it show us that, hey, in case you didn't figure it out, the dad's abusive, like really abusive. We don't have to spell it out for you because we're just going to show you it here. But more importantly, having Harry as this like amateur magician tells you so much about this movie, because the entire time, all Shane Black's doing is using misdirection to bury the lead in the entire film.
That's it. I mean, this is a movie full of MacGuffins every time. I mean, everybody has a duplicate. Everybody. I mean, I love that they don't even recognize each other the first time, and Michelle Monaghan does, even though you think, and like it just keeps folding on itself. I love all the times that him and Michelle Monaghan are going to sleep together, and then he sleeps with the friend instead, and then he turns out that she slept with, what is it, John Chaney or something like that, and how could John Chutney? How could you? And then that breaks that up. Like, I love that throughout the entire movie, those things happen all the time. And like, I know a lot of people might not be fans of it, but I personally also love The Nice Guys. And I think that like Shane Black just really knows how to lean into the Hollywood tropes. What is it that makes a film noir tick, and how to keep you entertained, because you are flopping around a lot. You're never completely focused in on, you're focused in on what he wants you to be focused in on, but you're not focusing on what's actually important to what's going on in the movie.
Which, like you said, is kind of the center of a film noir anyways. These films never really have these deep plot twists in them, but they just obscure them right below the surface enough for you not to expect it when it does get revealed at the end of the film. So when we have Harry coming in to figure out this murder mystery, essentially, and then we have like those throwaway lines that there's always two cases and everything, and we see it unfold. We're so focused on the fact that there are two cases that are connected to be one case that we never truly come back around to the fact that we're told the truth in the first time we're told it in this film.
Yeah. And that's a good writer. I mean, that's a confident writer where he is writing everything down the entire movie. That is going, he's telling you right away, like, this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen. He's just going right down the line. But he is so confident that he can tell you everything that's going to happen, but still keep you guessing. And that's fun. If you really start to look at film noirs, and I have a few film noirs on my list. I don't have a lot. Like, I have Sunset Boulevard, I have Double Indemnity, Chinatown, LA Confidential. I have movies like that. We're going to be watching The Long Goodbye pretty soon as a replacement movie. But like, when you really start to break down film noirs are the same thing almost every single time. You know what's going to happen in just about every film noir from the moment you put that movie on until that movie ends. Like, you know what's going to happen. And my thing is, how do you spice that up? You have to do it with dialogue, and you have to do it with, make it interesting enough what's happening. Shane Black does a really good job of that in this movie.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because we're not really sure if we're supposed to like Harry the entire movie or dislike Harry. He's presented as this like noble character a lot of the time, but the first time we see him as an adult, he's also robbing a store
Yep.
and is the cause for his friend dying.
Yeah. And I love how that comes up at the very end of the movie where Val Kilmer's just like, stop robbing stores. You're not a scumbag. But yeah, I mean, that we see that this guy is a low life. Like we see that he's a fraud. And I think like that's also leaning into the Hollywood thing of like so many people come out to Hollywood, they're gonna restart, they're gonna make a name for themselves, they're gonna just throw their past away. And we see both versions of that in this. We see the person who goes out there young, I'm gonna be an actress and can barely get any roles. And we see the person who just moves into it because they are kind of an asshole. But how all of that stuff really doesn't matter as the movie starts going, because once you're out there, nobody really cares about what your past is. It's how can you help me now? All those little conversations, Robert Downey Jr. talking to people at the bars and at the parties, and they just stop talking. And then you have Michelle Monaghan who can go home with everybody because it's just a bunch of creepy guys like Robert Downey Jr. It's so like on the nose, but it still works really, really well. And I mean, this is Shane Black's an interesting guy because I can never tell if he hates LA or if he actually really likes LA. I think he's definitely fascinated by it, but I don't get that type of like Paul Thomas Anderson, like with like, this was my childhood. And yeah, it wasn't necessarily good, but this is where I grew up, like nostalgia kind of feeling. And I also don't get really like the there's I can't think of one right now off the top of my head, but where it's like this is a cesspool and I hate every single thing about it.
Yeah, it is kind of hard to discern because we kind of have this idea that Hollywood's corrupting young women and it's really working in a way where these people are out here, they're trying to make a living, but they're all just failing over and over and over again. And it's a common theme we see in film a lot. I mean, I went and saw Last Night in Soho this weekend, and it's a theme of that in London instead of LA, right? So it's a theme that we see presented a lot. But we also have this idea that someone can kind of stumble into it and find their right place in the world through it.
Yeah. And I love how it's like, I'm where I'm meant to be. Like he says those things early on. Here's how I got to the party. Here's this, here's that, whatever. And like, I also like that the Michelle Monaghan character for Harry isn't like a college sweetheart or a high school. It's literally like we were 7 years old and like we talked in high school, whatever, but I forgot about this person. Like I don't recognize this person anymore. I think that's really good for this movie because it kind of can cut out all of that BS of like, well, you remember in college when we were doing that? Blah. No, it's like, remember when we were children and now we're 40 and we're kind of pathetic or 34, whatever they are. I love it. I like that he leans into even that and makes the femme fatale somebody who's so far from his past. And it's showing that like he's really trying to cling to that because he has just completely fallen off the deep end. And Gay Perry's not actually his friend in this movie. It's not like they have to like team up because they're buddies. Gay Perry's literally just trying to help him become a detective so that he can ultimately get Colin Farrell to take $2 million less.
Yeah. And then also the fact that like Perry's involvement in this is just, you can tell he's just covering his ass for most of this movie.
Say that one more time.
That Perry's just covering his ass for most of the movie because you just get to a point where it's like Harry finds the dead body in his hotel room and Perry's like, okay, well, I guess I have to help now.
Yeah.
And
then you start thinking, and what I started thinking this is like, is this a setup on Robert Downey Jr. this whole movie? Like, is Val Kilmer setting everything up against him to be like, ooh, I hid that body. Ooh, we did this. Ooh, we did. Like, you start to get those thoughts, which is another fun little misdirection that Shane Black's able to throw in here because it would be believable. We don't know this guy at all. And like, what is this BS job he has? Does he actually like, is he like a fixer? We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, all we can, and because the way that it's presented, and because it's Hollywood, and because we don't really know what's going on in the entire movie, we can never truly be sure of Perry's intent because it's kind of going above and beyond what you would expect the job description he was paid for to do was.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, why is he helping him with dead bodies? Why is he like getting so involved in this, driving out to like all those things? But at the end of the day, what we end up learning is, well, he actually was working on a case himself. So what is his job? Like, what does he really do? We never really get an answer to that. Like, we don't get like what he really does, because whatever they're telling you he's doing isn't really what he's doing. Like, he is involved in real cases, but I don't know.
That's kind of the wonder of a private investigator, though, right?
Yeah.
It's this, and part again, like reeling it back to film noir in general, is what is a private investigator? Like, when we get down to it, they exist. They go out. They usually kind of like snap a few pictures. What most private investigators are seeing if someone's cheating on someone or something.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they're not really going into these heavier crime situations. So, and that's exactly what happens in this film too, right? The only reason Perry and Harry are there to witness this body being dumped in the lake in the first place is because the Harmy's character, or Harmy's sister, believed that he was setting him up to see incest. Right? So it's so interesting because it presents this character of the PI, who is this mysterious character in general, because no one really knows what that job is, because it doesn't really exist as much in today's world, but it was so idolized and like raised up so much in these film noirs that everyone kind of knows it exists, but no one really knows exactly what they do.
Well, and I think that is why these neo-noirs work so well. Because if you think about it, a neo-noir almost never, and I'm probably going to get shit for this, but it almost never actually has a private investigator doing the investigating. It's always like in this movie, Robert Downey Jr. is an actor, and now he's investigating. We have Brick, where it's a high school student who's investigating. When you start to like look at how these movies work, a lot of times they use the private investigator tactic because they don't understand the police force. The writer doesn't understand really the police force side of things enough. And the police force side of things kind of makes it, oh, you got to do it by the book and whatever. Well, now you can do it off the book. You can do it your own way. I'm going to go slap people around and do whatever. Like, you're going against the law. Now everything's against you. The cops don't like you. The criminals don't like you because you're just a private investigator. And what can you uncover? And I think because you can have a private, literally be anybody. You can be a pizza delivery man. It doesn't matter. I think that's what makes them so compelling, because when you get these interesting ones, it's always like, what would you do if you were, Pineapple Express is essentially a film noir. I mean, it's not, but like essentially that's what they're doing. It's like two stoners end up like trying to solve a mystery of what's going like. When you start to break the movies down like that, I think that's what's so compelling about them. And one like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is a box office disaster, also because it was before Robert Downey Jr. had really made his comeback. Because that didn't really happen until Iron Man 3 years later, and Tropic Thunder both come out in the same year. I think that, that's what's so compelling about it now, and for like us movie fans, because a film noir, just setting it and making it the way, like even Chinatown was a risky movie, because Chinatown is following so by the book of what was happening in those 40s movies, where they were just overproducing them and they were all kind of the exact same thing.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you go back and look at these film noirs, I mean, there are some phenomenal film noirs out there, but they do kind of get a little tiring after a while because they do have those similar beats. And that's what's kind of nice about the neo-noirs, is that we're so far removed from noirs at this point that they do feel more refreshing now, because they aren't every second film coming out of Hollywood.
Yeah, and the reason they were popping out was because they were so cheap to make and it was easy and whatever. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang wasn't a cheap movie to make. Brick is a cheap movie to make for sure. I mean, Brick is, have you seen Brick, John? You should watch Brick. I think you'd really enjoy Brick. So that was Ryan Johnson's first movie. It's Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Emily De Ravine from Lost. She's in it. Really good movie, like very entertaining, very overly stylized, and made on a really cheap budget. you can make these cheaper, but back in the day, that's why they were turning them out, because they were so cheap. And you could get an A-list star who was in like the studio system and just throw them in the movie. And great, we have a black and white, whatever. And but they do become stale after a while, especially like if you're not watching a good one. That's why like I found it interesting with like the Black Book, the movie we watched earlier in this podcast. I think that is an interesting take on the film noir that was coming out in the 40s. But when you start looking at them, you have the Maltese Falcon, Out of the Past, you know, whatever, the Big Sleep. Like you start going through some of these in the 40s, but there's so many just meh ones that are thrown in there too, because it was just like, how can we churn these out and whatever. They had to get original with them if they wanted to bring them back. I still think that film noirs are some of the most interesting movies that come out because it's a mystery. And at the end of the day, who killed who is a fun story. That's a good thing to watch. But how do you make it fresh so that it's something people actually do want to sit down and watch? That's the hardest thing for the writers, because at this point, we have seen every single thing that a film noir could offer.
And I think that's why it's really lots of like the neo-noirs have embraced that idea of also critiquing Hollywood, because LA is just like the perfect setting for a noir because it does have that seedy underbelly that just lends itself so well to secrets. And when we have that option, it just makes sense to then provide that meta commentary of it, just like this film does, because it's more interesting than the mystery itself sometimes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you have to be winking at the camera almost always in film noirs now, because you like a lot of the stuff that takes place in these, you couldn't really get away with. Like, I love LA Confidential because LA Confidential is a present day film noir that doesn't wink at the camera really, but it's set in the 40s or 50s or whatever. Like, it's set during film noir times, even though it's being made in 97, and it's not doing what Kiss Kiss Bang Bang does. That's just like an expertly crafted screenplay. I honestly believe one of the best ever. But so many things that happen in film noirs wouldn't really happen. So you do need to wink at the camera a lot sometimes, because we know, like, what, like, is a high school student really going to be walking around trying to solve the murder of some girl who he barely knew? Probably not. But when you lead with that, and that's what's like, okay, you got me now. I'm hooked. Like, I'm ready to go. Missing person, missing girl, missing guy. I don't care what it is. That's going to hook you. And, yeah, I mean, it really works in this movie. I actually hadn't seen this movie until recently, and now I've probably seen it like 5 or 6 times, but I don't think I watched this until maybe 3 years ago for the first time. And now I've seen it a lot. And it's one, whenever it's on, I'll turn it on. And you know, or like, you know, it's been on Canopy for me here. So I'll go out of my way to watch it.
Yeah, and it's just fun. And it is really a shame that Shane Black kind of didn't get the ball rolling more with his directing career after this, because I do think he could have provided us with some really fascinating takes on the neo-noir and just like buddy cop and what Shane Black does so great, which is his writing, which, it's going to be a hit or miss, but he nails it completely in this film.
Yeah, he really does. And my fiance just texted me, I guess she's watching it, but Your Man from up in Canada, when they did The Kid Detective, that was another, that's a neo-noir. You know, I mean, that's a neo-noir, and that's leaning into it. And it has its serious moments. This is one thing I like about Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. It balances its tone incredibly well, because it is fun, it is silly, it is goofy, but it's also got its heavy moments. The film noirs need to have heavy moments. I mean, when you think about it, and I know I talked about this in the past, but the Chinatown thing with Jack Nicholson's racist joke that's in it and all of those things, and it's leaning in so hard to like these overconfident, overcocky people. But then it gets heavy at the end where it's like, you know, I don't want to spoil Chinatown, but anyway, when it gets into all of the twists and turns that come with Chinatown, it's like, holy crap, like, this is a heavy movie. The Nice Guys gets heavy at the end. These film noirs have to get heavy because it needs to feel like there's real stakes for these characters. And your main character always has to kind of be an ass. They have to be somebody that you shouldn't like. And I think Robert Downey Jr. coming off of his jail time and addiction or whatever it was, coming off of all that, and then coming into this movie and being like, you don't like me, but I might be able to make you like me. That is exactly what this character needs to be, and it's awesome. I mean, it really is. He leans into it, he plays it really well. But yeah, has there ever been a lead in a film noir where you're like, great person, love them? No, they're always conflicted. No. They're always going against everything. They're not doing things the right way all the time. But that's what makes them compelling.
Mm-hmm. And what I really like about the way that Shane Black approaches it is that in many of our noir films, our protagonist is usually like this brooding expert at everything who's like figuring things out. But we kind of have this bumbling idiot figuring everything out in this movie. And it's great because then it gets contrasted with a scene like the scene where he crawls out from under the bed is such a powerful scene. Just to have him stand and then realize he has to kill this guy so he can survive. Yeah. And then just his reaction to having done that afterwards.
Yeah. I totally agree because we're not watching a cold-blooded killer kill people. It's not the whole Humphrey Bogart stick 'em up type thing. It's much more serious than that. It's taking a real person who's not in that world. No problem stealing, but he's a petty thief. He's not like a criminal. There's a difference there, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I wish Shane Black was able to build up more of a following. He really was never successful in building up a following. It's pretty amazing that the guy who wrote Lethal Weapon really never became a household name with how big Lethal Weapon was, makes Danny Glover, makes Mel Gibson, but just never became a household name, despite some, really good movies in there. I mean, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, The Nice Guys, those are really good movies, and he just could not get it going. Maybe too because he is such a noir writer. That's really the only thing he does. That might hurt him, but yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like Iron Man 3 didn't help him either. I mean, you said it's the worst. I personally love Iron Man 3. It's one of my
you like bad movies and trilogies though. We've established this.
Well, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but but I just feel that like because he was kind of that was his shot, right?
Yeah.
It was like here's Iron Man 3, and then the general public didn't like it. And a lot of that came down to the fact that it was a very Shane Black movie.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just didn't like that.
It's like when Michel Gondry does The Green Hornet. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
Like you're not going to become a household name for doing that just because it's a popular thing. Like that's why a lot of times, like the directors who actually end up being the most successful, although Ryan Coogler is a big exception to this. I'll just say that before anybody yells at me. But a lot of the directors who become really successful making like these franchise type movies, a lot of times they're not household. They haven't really built up any type of following yet. So there's no expectation. And that's why it's easy to be like, oh, they directed this one movie. Now we're going to throw them on here and they're going to do what the studio says. Shane Black's not going to do what the studio says. David Fincher, even though he wasn't a household name by any means when he did Alien 3, very much was fighting against the system at that point and pretty much took his name off everything. So it kind of depends on who you are. But yeah, to say Shane Black, you're going to come make Iron Man 3. Well, he's going to want to have a lot more say in that movie than somebody who's just been a studio director their whole life. And that's why PTA has never done a studio movie. That's why Tarantino hasn't done a studio movie. Then he's supposed to do Star Trek. Like that's why these things don't happen because they're too much who they are. And that while they're iconic and massive for like cinephiles, they're still not going to ever hit the box office of an Avengers or something like that, which today on FX, like one of the fight scenes from one of the Avengers is on. And I don't care what anybody says. It was horrible. I was like, what am I even looking at? I wanted to throw up. It was so stupid. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. John, finish us out on Kiss Kiss Bang Bang before we start talking about another Jean Pierre Jeunet movie.
If anything, watch this movie just for Val Kilmer's performance because it is absolutely phenomenal. He's so entertaining in this movie. And I mean, I know he had his documentary come out recently. Give this a watch because it's worth it just for Val Kilmer.
Yeah, he's so straight-faced the entire movie. It's really so well done. It really is so well done how straight-faced he is the entire movie.
Yeah, and I mean, even like his delivery, I think one of my favorite lines in this entire movie is, look at the definition of idiot in the dictionary. Do you know what you'll see? And Robert Downey Jr. says, what, a picture of me? He's like, no, the definition of idiot, which you fucking are.
Yeah. I love that.
It's such a great riff. it's such a predictable. It's this predictability that's then like subverted by Shane Black, and it is really Shane Black's writing. But Val Kilmer's delivery of that line is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, so Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, not on either one of our top hundreds, but definitely a movie that's worth a watch. And it's sort of a Christmas movie. I mean, Michelle Monaghan is gorgeous, and she's running around in the Santa outfit the entire time. So it's like
it takes place
it's
at Christmas. That
movie.
makes it a Christmas movie.
But I also love that it's Christmas in LA, where it's just sunny and everything is oversaturated. I love that. So nice little style choices. But anyway, John, I'll go first with the best movie I watched this week because I already talked about it like crazy last week because I really haven't watched that much. But it was It Follows. I watched It Follows right before Halloween. It seriously is one of the best. It's not just one of the best horror movies of the last decade. It's one of the best movies of the last decade. It is so phenomenally well made. I love every second of that movie. There are some genuinely terrifying moments in it. It's a slow burn horror, but it is a classic, and I think that's going to be a yearly watch for me. I don't think there's any way around it. So I think it's officially made its way in as this is a yearly watch, even when I'm living in South Florida and it's 85 degrees on Halloween.
Yeah, no, it's a phenomenal movie. Just for the style that it approaches everything, and it really did kind of kickstart this whole like new wave horror that we're in now, and it's just awesome. It's so much fun.
Yeah, what you got?
Oh, easily The French Dispatch. No question, hands down. Probably a top 3 Wes Anderson film for me.
Which is saying a lot because we have Grand Budapest Hotel coming up for you.
Yeah, it's in 2 weeks we get to talk more about Wes Anderson. But this movie, the way it's so different, yet so similar to Wes Anderson movies, and I really like seeing him explore different things, like the use of black and white mixed in with his like general palette that he uses in his films. And I just love the fact that Anderson films are just a theater troupe doing these movies because it's always the exact same people. He'll throw in a couple more every single movie and somehow get absolutely phenomenal performances from them. Benicio del Toro is phenomenal in this movie, as is Timothée Chalamet, as well as every person you would ever expect to be in a Wes Anderson movie. It's great. He perfectly captures this idea of like an arts magazine through the way that he tells the story. It's so fun. When you get a chance to go see it, please do so.
Yeah, I definitely want to get in there and see that pretty much as soon as possible. Just got to actually like make it happen. Don't know if it's playing around me. Haven't really had a free night, but definitely on my list of movies to see. I still have to watch that, Dune, and Last Night in Soho. So want to watch all 3 of those. Hopefully I can get all 3 of them done before the next time we podcast because that would be awesome.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into a very long engagement, which is my number 62. A surprisingly hard movie to find subtitled.
Yes.
Why is it so difficult to find this movie subtitled? Everywhere I looked, they only had the dubbed version. Jean-Pierre Jeunet is not like a obscure person. City of Lost Children was on in subtitled. Delicatessen's on in subtitled. Amelie's everywhere subtitled. Couldn't believe how hard this was. I actually had to rent it off of YouTube, which I don't think I've ever done in my entire life. But now I really know that I have to go buy this movie before it just goes out of print altogether because, God, Criterion's got to pick this movie up. I don't know why they haven't picked up Jeunet just in general, but Criterion's got to pick this movie up. Anyway, this is I believe, the 5th Jean-Pierre Jeunet movie, and I probably should have known that beforehand. But this is, I think, the 5th movie by him, coming after City of Lost Children, Delicatessen, the really, really bad Alien movie, Amelie, and then he gets into this one. I would also say that this is probably the last great movie he made. I would throw his first 4 movies, not counting Alien Resurrection, Delicatessen, City of Lost Children, Amelie, Very Long Engagement, up against anybody's first 4 movies. I think that's just one masterpiece after another. So stylistic, everything's so awesome. This movie is obviously very heavily influenced by Amelie, which I have as my number 4 movie of all time. Whether it be like the train scenes, the colors, a lot of what a lot of like the narration choices he has, little moments like that. But to me, this is one of the best war movies ever made because he tells such a story with this movie. and he does it in such a unique way. He still throws in his whimsy and his people just running into each other. They're eating at a cafe and they happen to run into somebody who just happened to overhear. He still throws that in, but that's so Genet. And so I think this movie's phenomenal. I can't believe that it hasn't been discussed more by people, that it didn't catch on more. The fact that it's got 3 of the greatest female actresses of our generation in the movie with Jodie Foster, Audrey Tautou, and Marion Cotillard in one of her first like roles. This was really before, I think this was before La Vie en Rose. I think La Vie en Rose was 2007, and that was when she like really became a household name. But this was before that. It has so much working for it. It's so entertaining, and yet it tells a romance story, but still very much has the epicness of the war movie. There's scenes in this that can compete with 1917, which Sam Mendes had all this and everything going for him. And this is just a French director with a bunch of like, again, like you were talking about with Wes Anderson, he's kind of got his troupe. He's got his people, and he just adds in Marion Cotillard and Jodie Foster for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea what this movie was coming into it. I remember I looked it up on Netflix, and I'm like, why are all these war movies coming up? What's happening? And then I sit down and I watch it, and this is honestly probably the best World War I movie of all time. Because not only do we get this, we have this horror of war aspect of it, and like the trench warfare and how terrifying that was, and the lengths these soldiers were willing to go to get out of fighting in the war. But we also get the other side of it, which is the people who are left behind by these soldiers in a world where communication isn't as easy as it is for us today, or even as it was come World War II. And just that it instills this sense of hope while being so melancholy the entire time. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking the whole time I was watching this movie, and I think this all the time when it comes to movies, but technology has really ruined drama a lot of the time. A lot of it is manufactured drama. I mean, last night was election night in America. Everybody's, oh, this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. I mean, I think they knew the winner of the both governor elections, maybe not the New Jersey one, but I think they knew the winner of both elections, but all the news sources are going to try to keep it going for an extra 3 hours to get their ratings and whatever. And then you watch a movie like A Very Long Engagement, where it literally was, if we switch the dog tags, you're now dead and I'm alive. And really the person who's alive is actually dead. And I love all of the little, like kind of like we were talking about Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, all the misdirection that Genet throws at you in this movie. He takes with the German boots, you're like, well, they're good. That's why he's going to survive, because he's on the German side. And then later in the movie, it's like, actually, that would mean that they know that you killed somebody. So they're not going to, you're not going to be able to work through that one. And then you have the whole thing of, well, who actually was wearing the German boots? Was it this guy? Was it that guy? The guy who doesn't answer ends up being the one who actually survived the entire thing. There's so many moments of misdirection, and it all works. And in like this itself is such a good mystery movie of her trying to put the pieces together to figure all of these things out, and how she can't piece it together, and how is this going to happen? And the payoffs are all there. And one of my favorite things that Genet does, and he does this in Amelie, and that's why it just like hits me. But I love when he starts doing the present tense narration. Like when he starts like from an outsider's perspective, but it's the character doing it. Like when you watch Amelie, it'll be like, it's 14 degrees. The air is perfect. The barometer, whatever. And it just keeps going. And then it's like, and then it gets into the scene. And the ending of this movie, when it jumps into that and it starts doing she sits and watches him, and it's actually Audrey Tautou narrating it. And she sits and she sits and she sits. And that's just how it ends. I love when he does stuff like that, because everything you're watching in a movie, everything that you're reading, everything is always so past tense. It's like, oh, this happened. Everybody always talks in past tense. But he manages to make the present tense stuff work so well and use it so effectively for specific moments in this movie and in all of his movies, where the present tense is more important, is so important that you should be living that moment with her. She went through all this stuff. Everybody's talking in the present tense. He's dead, all of that, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden at the very end of the movie, it's she sits, she watches, she sits. Not she watched him. No, she's doing that right now. And that's what she's doing pretty much from here until eternity. It's brilliant and it's beautiful. And Janae is just a master who, you know, he caught on in America for Amelie. This movie wasn't as successful as it needed to be. And then he just totally disappeared.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy now that we've already watched 2 Janae movies for this podcast already. And they're both phenomenal films. And the fact that Janae can give us this like ending where in most movies, an ending where, oh, this person's dead. Oh, it turns out they're actually alive would feel cheap. It would kind of feel like a cop-out. But Janae manages to structure it in a way where it feels so earned that he's there. Because in the end, he's there, but he has no idea he's there.
Yeah.
And it still kind of has that bitterness to it. But Mathilde is just so happy. And it feels so great because of the journey we've gone on throughout the rest of the film.
Yeah, and he doesn't have that war horse bullshit. There you go, Spielberg, where it's like, I hugged a horse even though I'm blind and therefore war is good. You know what I mean? Like it's very much like the only part in this movie that feels like, oh, it's convoluted is the part where in the cafe, she wipes it down and sees MMM. But whatever, if your husband comes back and that's a story he would tell you, would remember that. But everything else is so on point. And like you said, at the end, he doesn't even know who he is. So how could he possibly go and seek her out? He doesn't know who she is. And I think that's what's so amazing about this story is she is searching for him for years because he can't possibly search for her because he doesn't even know. He wouldn't even know that it existed. And now she gets there and we're not left with this, oh, everything's going to be great. Everything's going to work out. But we're going to hope it is because it did before. And that's the type of ending that, you know, really can be powerful in these types of war movies or these sweeping romantic epics, whatever you want to call it. And that's why I prefer this one kind of, you know, to like an Atonement. It does give you a little bit of hope. Atonement gives you zero hope. This movie gives you some hope in that. And for a guy who has a lot of depressing movies on my list, I like that this one isn't super depressing.
Especially when you consider the fact that like hope's kind of this theme given to us throughout the film, but it's kind of like this misdirect of hope again, because we have those scenes where Mathilde's like, if this happens, then he's still alive or he'll come back or whatever.
So childish.
And it's always something not quite what she said, but like enough to be like, oh my God, it's happening. He's going to be okay. And then it's like, oh, just kidding.
Yeah.
This is something completely different. It's like when she's chasing after the car and trying to get to the car before the bend, and it's another car that comes by. It's like, oh, that's really depressing. Thanks for turning this very happy moment into something incredibly dark and depressing, Janae. But because he's doing that throughout the film, when you do get to the point where he is alive, there's an argument he's not alive because he doesn't remember who he is.
Yeah, absolutely. And will he ever get that back? Will he not? We don't know. But the hope is so impactful in this. And what's good about this movie is, for as depressing as this movie could have been, I mean, the opening is depressing. You mentioned right away, hey, this is an Angelo Badalamenti score, because it is.
Yes.
But at the beginning, the opening is such a ballsy opening because it's Mathilde's character narrating, although I don't even know if it's really Mathilde's character because it's kind of like the narrator version of Mathilde. But it's this character narrating, talking about these 4 people who all shot themselves in the foot or the hand or whatever it was. And now they're all going to be killed. And yet he's able to make this movie still have all of the comedic elements necessary to make a movie like this work. Because you can't have Dominic Pignon play the role he's playing, where he's got the because he's a clown. I mean, in real life, he's essentially a clown. We see that in Delicatessen. We see he's the heel in Amelie, and now he comes out and he's in this, and him with the post office and all of that and all this. But those light moments, and then when you have the big moments of he's dead and now hope is gone, he's able to nail those because he's made you care about all of these characters so much. In, like I always talk about, like Saving Private Ryan. I think it's got a great opening. I think the rest of the movie just falters. But one of my big problems with Saving Private Ryan is we don't have any fun and games with the characters. It's literally like just get to another obstacle and get killed. This movie being told from the woman's point of view who's at home and isn't out there, you have to have more fun and games, because otherwise it would get really stale to be like, here's a letter, here's a letter, here's a letter. And to mix in Marion Cotillard's character with all of this, where she's the dark, like, I'm going to kill everybody who's screwed over my lover. There's so much fun going on in this movie, despite the fact that it's a very depressing through line. That's a hard thing to balance. And we talked about Kiss Kiss Bang Bang with its great tone. A Very Long Engagement's tone from top to bottom is just, it's second to none. And it's such an impossible tone to pull off.
Yeah, especially when you're balancing these horrors of war, and trench warfare is never. No. I don't think trench warfare can be discussed enough to say how terrible it is, and how horrible these conditions were, and how much of a death sentence these men had just being told to get up out of the trench.
Yeah,
and you're balancing it with this hopefulness in Mathilde's character, but you're also balancing it with Tina killing people in fantastic ways.
Yeah. And there are some brutally graphic ways that Tina kills people. I mean, the scene where she kills, I just want to call him the butcher from Delicatessen, but whatever his name is, when she kills him, I mean, that scene's brutal with the shooting of the glass and everything. The scene by the river there is amazing. I mean, there's so many great moments with her character, and it all leads to her pulling out that note, and it says, "Don't ruin your life for me." After she just ruined her whole life for him. Like, it's those ups and downs, but we never lose sight of what the story ultimately is. The Jodie Foster scenes, even though she's barely in the movie, the Jodie Foster scenes are heartbreaking. I mean, the part with her husband, and then her husband's best friend, and how it actually turns into an affair and all that, and the guilt and everything like that. All of these things, he's able to create so much mystery around what should be pretty straightforward, but he's also giving us a serious uniqueness that a lot of times war movies don't have. Malick, when he made The Thin Red Line, that was a unique war movie. Whether you like it or not, that's a unique war movie. A lot of times war movies kind of fall back on the same tropes of they get so caught up in, like, okay, how can I get to the point of this character either dying or saving this person or the hero moment or whatever. And in this movie, we have two friends who are fighting over nonsense. Well, not nonsense, but it seems like they're fighting over nonsense. And how could they not like each other? And we get the moments where she tells the bartender and all that, but we still don't know why. And then when we do find out why, it's heartbreaking, because you see how much it ripped them all apart. And you know that most of the people involved in this are dead. How they landed on Jodie Foster for this role, I will never know. I love that it happened, but I will just never know how that happened. But I love how he pieces all of these people's stories together without ever making it feel like too much. And by the end, you're just like, all right, it's just reveal after reveal after reveal after reveal. And like for the last half hour of the movie, it's just whipping back and forth. And you're like, how is this happening? It's so good. And yeah, man, I don't know how I can get people to watch more Janae movies. I don't think I can, but I wish I could.
I mean, you're getting me to watch them, and
that's good.
Hopefully our listeners as well. So it's a start.
It's a start. I mean, I will say, and I really believe this, like they always teach foreign language films and American foreign language films, whatever, in screenwriting classes or whatever. And like when you go to film school, they're always showing you the same stuff. The problem is I love Ingmar Bergman. Ingmar Bergman isn't going to be accessible to a 18-year-old kid who just got out of college in 2000, or just got out of high school in 2021. And all of the Italian neorealism stuff is so boring. It's so dated. Like, it's just like, even if you're a fan of it, that's not going to attract an 18-year-old unless that 18-year-old is incredibly pretentious and just like whatever. That's not going to work. But when you look at the styles of what Janae does, to me, these are the types of movies that if you're going to be showing world cinema, you should be showing these. Because if you look at the growth of Janae from his first movie to his fifth, it is insane what he started out as with Delicatessen, went to with City of Lost Children, then he gets a Hollywood movie with Alien Resurrection, then he hits Amelie, and then he hits A Very Long Engagement. When you watch that trajectory, you can learn everything about filmmaking just in those 5 movies. I'm not kidding. Like an Alien Resurrection, maybe not for a good reason, but you're still going to learn a lot about it. But I would put those 4 movies literally up against anybody's first 4 movies. And I would say his are going to be better than yours. And you can learn so much from it, but I think they're so accessible. People just don't know they exist. Why did I not watch Amelie when I was in film school? I don't know, but I should have. That's a movie I should have watched. Rome Open City is not a movie that I needed to watch. Amelie, that's a movie I should have watched. And I think when you can cross that curriculum, these movies are old now. Delicatessen's 30 years old. When I was going to college, 30 years old was Raging Bull. That's a difference. That's a big difference. Like they weren't scared to show you Raging Bull in a film class. For some reason, they're still scared to show you 90s movies. But all that's to say, I think Janae is just he just got it. And his style is perfect and all of that. And then unfortunately, he just wasn't able to keep it going. He's supposed to have a movie coming out that's in like post-production or something, but who knows? It's supposed to have Dominic Pignon, so it'll probably be good.
So does everyone nowadays, though, right?
I know.
Everyone's got a movie in post-production right now.
I know. His last one, though, was all the way back in 2014. If you don't count like his TV movies for Casanova or whatever the hell it was. His last one, The Young and Prodigious T.S. Spivet. Could not be less interested in that movie than I was with that one. So there you go. Anyway, John. So this is the second. Have you seen Amelie or City of Lost Children yet?
I have not.
Okay, so you watched 2. I'll be interested to see what you think of Amelie once you see it, and then you can kind of be like all of the influences that he took from Amelie and put into A Very Long Engagement, and see if you still think so highly of A Very Long Engagement, because there are a lot of copying that he does in between the 2 movies. And it's, I mean, the train scenes literally might be like copy and pasted from Amelie into this one. But I just think it's a fun war movie that manages to balance a bunch of stories and keep the heart in it. And you don't always see that. Sometimes the action gets in the way or I mean, and he balances a lot of characters. I mean, this is a straight up epic. He balances a lot of characters in this movie, and he expects a lot from his audience to be able to keep up with who's doing what and why they're doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, that is kind of one of the hardest things with making war movies. I think it's one of the ways a lot of directors falter with their war movies is that they don't focus enough on character and they're more focused on the events in the movie. And Janae doesn't do that. He's all focused on character in this film.
Yeah. I mean, down to the postman and Dominic Pignon getting in a fight because he keeps ruining his gravel. Like, and then finally, so he says, "Screw it, I'm going to put whatever down, stone down," and now you're going to slide in. Like, it's all those little things. It's all those little things, and they add up to a lot. And it's got very dark themes, but and I just love Janae's style. I love the colors he uses in his movies. I love how he makes it. He overexposes things so that you're watching his movie. And especially in this one, I love how like yellow it is. So it does almost feel like you're watching a newspaper sometimes, where it's like, like an old newspaper, an old newsreel. You're watching that kind of thing as it just unfolds back in what is this? This place in 1920, I think, something like that.
Yes.
It's just, it's a shame. It's a shame with Alien Resurrection. He caught on so late at the end of the Alien franchise when it was already like unsalvageable, because he never really got his chance. Like we were talking about with Shane Black, he got his chance with Iron Man 3. Jean-Pierre Jeunet got his chance with Alien 4 because it couldn't be worse than Alien 3. But he tried to, again, make it such a Jean-Pierre Jeunet movie.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what happened with Shane Black and Iron Man. And it's like, well, you can't really do that. So.
Yeah.
And I will say that though, the first 4 Aliens might have the 4 best directors of any franchise ever.
Yep.
Considering how that went with Ridley Scott to James Cameron to David Fincher to Jean-Pierre Jeunet, that's insane.
Yeah. But it also goes to show you what studio interference does.
I'll tell you what. Even the best directors can be screwed over by that and have absolutely no chance. But it's crazy that he made that, and then 3 years later came out with his biggest hit, and Amelie is still like.
And
well
Amelie was
beloved.
huge, and I'm looking forward to watching it and discussing it in a year.
In a year, I know. It's but that's what's crazy. We're pretty much just 1 year away from our top like 10 here. We are 1 year away from our top 10. In a year, we'll be hitting number 10. So that's next Christmas season, we'll be finishing this like in January, February of next year, maybe a little bit later if hopefully we take at least 1 week off. But yeah,
yes.
I am glad though that we were able to get this one out. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad we were able to find it. And actually
it was a struggle. It's hard. A struggle to find.
Yeah, so I'm gonna definitely go buy this movie before it disappears forever. But love this movie. Think it's just phenomenal. It lives up to everything that I remembered it being after I watched it the first time and the second time and the third time and the fourth time. It totally lives up. And I hope other people enjoyed it too. But next week, John and I already said it. He's making me watch Spotlight, and we're taking my number 61, which is John's number 62. It's a Wonderful Life, and we're getting Christmas season started off early. A movie that everybody here has probably seen 575 times. I've seen it probably at least once a year, every year of my life, probably twice a year or 3 times a year more often than I'd like to admit. So that'll be a fun one. It's a Wonderful Life from 1946 and Best Picture winner Spotlight from 2015, going head to head next week at our number 61 to close out that 10 from 70 to 61. And then we get into our top 60 and we started off modern. Grand Budapest Hotel and The Impossible. So that'll be good. But anyway, I'm hoping I'll have more stuff on Letterboxd. So everybody keep following us over on Letterboxd. Somebody asked me to do a horror, like a top 100 horror list. And I really wish that I had the time to do that. But John, even though it's over, you should even though Halloween's over, you should probably do that because I feel like you have a lot of horror movies that you've seen.
I do have a lot of horror movies that I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that would be a good one. I would love to do that, but I got to actually think about that one. Can't just be throwing out any nonsense. So hopefully by next Halloween I'll have that done. But I think that would be a fun list to make. Anyway, that's it. We'll see you all next week. Probably same time, same place. All that fun stuff. And thanks for watching.
Bye.